Hey, welcome to the Healthful Woman Podcast, the fastest growing podcast in women's health. Today's Monday, April 14th, 2025. Today, I'm joined again by Chani Turk. As you learned last week, Chani is a midwife in Israel and a close friend of mine, and of course, a graduate of the great Ida Crown class of 1992. Last week, Chani and I talked about her background, how she decided to move to Israel and become a midwife there, as well as the differences between midwifery in America and in Israel. Today, we're going to talk about life in Israel for Chani since October 7th of 2023, how it affected her personally and professionally, as well as the amazing work she and other midwives in Israel are doing as part of an organization called By Your Side, hence the name of this podcast. Wishing everyone who is celebrating this week a wonderful Passover and Easter. Thanks for listening. See y'all next week. Welcome to today's episode of Healthful Woman, a podcast designed to explore topics in women's health at all stages of life. I'm your host, Dr. Nathan Fox, an OBGYN and maternal fetal medicine specialist practicing in New York City. At Healthful Woman, I speak with leaders in the field to help you learn more about women's health, pregnancy, and wellness. All right, Chani, welcome back to the podcast. Last week for our listeners and 1 minute ago for us, we were just talking about in general, how you got into nursing, how you got into midwifery, what it's like midwifery in Israel and what your job is like and, your family and your home life and your shifts and all that. And I wanted this week to switch gears and talk about how all of this changed October 7th of 23, when obviously I assume most of our listeners know that's, there was a horrible tragedy in Israel, a terror attack, many, many people, killed, kidnapped, still hostages. How did that affect you? I want to just start simply like professionally, and then we could talk about sort of personally and in your community. So how did that day impact you professionally?
So I guess, I wasn't working on October 7th. It was a Saturday. It was a Shabbat. It was a holiday. Happened to not be working. I think I must have worked like Monday after that, because I also was home that Sunday, which ended up being a very good thing for family and kids. But you go back to work, it's the unit is in shock. I mean, the country's in shock. You're sort of numb. Your ears attuned to the news all the time. We used to have the news. We have, computers at every nurse's doctor station, and they were always just regular computers for charting. And one of them was always open to a news station at all times. The staff room was always the news. Everyone that I work with is somehow connected to either a soldier that was called up or to somebody whose family member was affected or killed. And we're just, so it's almost like you're distracted, and then in a way you're at work. So that's helpful because you're working and you have to do what you have to do. It almost, in a way, it sort of takes your mind off of it, but it's always there, and everyone's experiencing it, and the patients are experiencing it, and the women and the men, and you have husbands coming in literally in uniform and with their machine guns, and you have family members who are coming in because the husbands aren't there, and everyone is just in a state of shock and sadness, and almost like no one knew what to do with themselves. So it was, it was a painful time all around. You could say that the delivery room is a happy place, but there was a level of sadness there. Not to mention, I'm just going to add this also, there's sirens going off all the time because there's rocket fire, which, living in America, growing up in America, you're like, rocket fire, what is that? What's a rocket? And here, missiles are flying toward the center of Israel. And so when that happens, a siren goes off in the hospital, and, your phone is lighting up and going off, and there's over a loudspeaker saying, everybody go to the safe area. And a safe area, what's a safe area? It's a stairwell. It happens to be all the delivery rooms are safe rooms. There's no windows in them, and they're built of concrete, so they're considered safe rooms. So we didn't have to move those women, but women in the triage, women in the lobby, and you're herding people. You're herding all these waddling pregnant women toward the stairwell, and your heart pounds, and it doesn't matter how many times you hear it. It's a scary sound. So it was definitely a tense time.
Yeah, I mean, for our listeners who aren't aware of what it's what it's like in Israel, I was trying to explain to someone, I said, there is nobody, there's no Israeli in that country who didn't know someone who either was kidnapped, was killed, and if they didn't know them directly, they knew their family member, right? Everyone knew somebody, right? Because it's not that big a country, and so many people were either, killed or kidnapped. And every single family in Israel, 100%, has people in them who are serving in the military, either actively or get called up in reserves. So there's nobody who's just sort of like walking around blissfully unaware of, or unaffected by what's happening. It's literally every single person, in addition to sort of dealing with their day to day, is thinking in the back of my mind, oh my God, like this happened to this person I know, or my family, my friend, my cousin, my friend's cousin, my cousin's friend, whatever it is. And
Right.
I have my kids in the army, my brother's in the army, my sister's in the army. Like it's all happening at that time as well. So people must also be so distracted with their own personal lives. I mean, you've got kids, right? And they're in the army.
Yes.
And so how do you work and deal with that at the same time?
It was hard. You're on your phone so much, it's ridiculous, because you're just, you're sort of waiting for a message from one of the kids. My son was in reserves, is in reserves. So he went in a day or two after, and my son-in-law went in on Sunday. He was down on the border of Gaza and eventually went into Gaza. My son is in a different unit, and they were in the Arab villages. And it's, you don't hear from them. They don't have their phones. You're not allowed to have contact with them on their end. So it's very distracting. It's, you're up at night. You basically, you don't leave your phone is basically, I mean, I'm a religious Jew, Orthodox Jew, and I keep Shabbat. Every single person at the synagogue was walking around with their phones. It all of a sudden became okay to hear a phone ring on Shabbat, and it was okay for that person to leave the synagogue because they needed to talk to their son because their son was finally calling for the first time in 2 weeks. It was a completely different. It's almost like I was talking to my daughter about this. I think I wrote something down about the day after, and it was about her and her husband and them saying goodbye. And when we dropped him off on his base, and she says, "Mommy, I don't remember that." It was literally like, it's literally so hard to have lived through it that I think sometimes we just sort of block out parts of the hardest memories. And yeah, there's no words to say other than it was hard. It was painful. It was nauseating. You're afraid to open the news because you're going to see that some other soldier was killed, or that they found another, kidnapped person was now found. They found their body. They weren't kidnapped; they were killed. And to read more and more stories, it was a horrific, unimaginable time.
The only comparable time that I can think of in my lifetime, at least, in this country, was pretty much, September 11th when that happened, and the towers.
Yeah,
and I remember because
exactly.
I was at the time an intern. It was actually probably think about it, probably about 10 days after I passed out at my first delivery. And so, because it was the same year I was an intern. And I remember I was just, we're on the postpartum floors, and I think I was even doing a circumcision or something. And then you heard what happened, and then it was just crazy. I mean, all hell broke loose in the hospital. They're trying to because this is not something that we're used to in Israel, they're much more sort of prepped for war, right? I mean, just people are, again, nothing like that, but there's sort of, it's on the mindset always, but not in New York City. And so we're like, oh, what do you do? Like, let's start discharging people to make room for all the injured folks. And it was just, it was the most, and that same thing, everyone's on their phones, and they sort of you couldn't travel. And it was such a horrible, but it's seared into your memory, certain parts, and other parts, I have no recollection of that week.
Yeah.
It's just because it's so intense. But obviously it's very different because, not as many, since New York and America is such a bigger country, even though so many people were killed, most people didn't know anyone who was killed in the same way. It's just, you don't compare tragedies because they're both awful, obviously. But I just remember that sort of mindset in the hospital. Did you guys, did things shift in terms of any of your policies, procedures, protocols, how you did things? Did people stay longer? Did they stay shorter? Did you have to change anything because of what was going on?
It's actually funny. The one thing that no, so obviously there's an emergency protocol in terms of shifts. However, they never implemented that. That was actually implemented more during Corona than now. But actually hospitals in the South, I think toward the border there, they did end up, they couldn't leave the hospital. So, the nurses who were supposed to come in or the staff who was supposed to come in couldn't get in, and the staff who were supposed to leave couldn't leave. So, but no, we didn't do that. But one thing that did change was because it was such a traumatic time, the anesthesiologist, when they would come in to do the epidural, it was really midwife, mom, and anesthesiologist. And they started allowing the dad to stay, or I should say, somebody to stay in, a family member to stay in with the mom, because everybody was just so on edge and so traumatized. And it was sort of like, okay, one thing we can do to calm everybody down is let them, let somebody else be there during the time of the epidural, which so many women have, it's a hard time for them. Anyways, it's scary for them. So that's the one change that I think that's funny that you asked that, but that is literally the one thing that that changed.
Has it remained?
Yeah, it's remained. I love it. It's great. And, obviously, like, who's used to doing a delivery with like machine guns in the room and like in the place in the corner, or dad's passed out in the chair because they're so tired. But yeah, no, in terms of policy, I think that's probably the one thing that's changed.
And what about just again, for our listeners to get a flavor, not at work, but just in your community, just like in the streets, in the supermarket, and in the synagogue, when you're talking to friends, like what was it like at that time, if you could describe it?
Well, first of all, the day of, like, October 7th, like, just going back to that day, all of a sudden you're hearing rumors and news, and you're running around to different neighbors' houses trying to on one hand, you're running around to people's houses. On the other hand, you're sort of almost afraid to leave your house, because we didn't know how far Hamas was going to get into the country at that time. Like, things were still out of control, and they were still all around the South. So nobody even knew. They were saying, be in your house, lock your doors, nobody knew what to expect. And outside, and this is Shabbat, this is the Sabbath, and it's plenty of Jews who don't drive on the Sabbath here, and their kids are all throwing on their uniforms and getting in cars and driving to their bases. Like, that day, they're getting called. And at that point, everybody starts turning on their phones, and I didn't, but any of the soldiers and my kids did. And in Jerusalem, where I had two of my kids were in Jerusalem, my two married children, and they had siren after siren after siren, and nobody knows, really what's going on. And it was a hard time. I remember Sunday, the day after, I went to the grocery store. My son-in-law's from Australia, and his parents happened to be here during that time. So I thought, like, I'll be nice. Their son is just been dropped off at an army base down in the southern border. I'm going to invite them for dinner. So we went to go, I don't know what I was thinking, because nobody could function. I went to the grocery store with my girls, and all of a sudden, like, I just started crying. We just started crying. Like, we're standing in the grocery store, and we just started crying. And my other daughter, whose friend had been killed on the 7th, I just hugged her. And normally you don't just start crying in the middle of a grocery store. And if you do, people are going to look at you weird. And nobody looked at us weird, because everybody is walking around at any minute ready to burst into tears. I was at the pharmacy, and the woman, the cashier, she was talking to her son before I got to the counter. And then I got there, and I listened to her, and she's saying to him, well, what can I send you? Do you need anything? Do you need this? Do you need that? And then she hung up the phone, and then she started crying, and then I started crying. And it's just like we're all in the same place of, our children are out there. We don't know what's going to be with them. We don't know what's going to be with the country. And so there was almost like no happiness. You felt like everything was sad. Everything was down. And yeah, it was hard. And all we did was talk about the war. There was no other conversation.
What else could you talk about? I mean, it's really, it's
as it is, we're still talking about it a lot.
No, I mean, listen, it hasn't ended, right? I mean, whatever it is, until everybody's home, it hasn't ended. And that's,
right.
And that's just the reality of it. And it's just,
right.
Yeah. And so I wanted you to get a chance to talk about what you guys are doing in Israel as a group of midwives, which is tell us about this program, By Your Side. just so we get a sense and we could talk about that.
So it's by the Midwife Organization, the National Midwife Organization, and they set up this program they realized that there was a need for women who were either widowed through the war, or whose husbands were injured either emotionally or physically. And they realized that there was a need for, more sensitive and intense care. And so they partnered midwives, volunteers, 2 to 3 midwives with each of these women. It started out with just a handful. I think if I'm not mistaken, we might have had over 50 women at this point. I might be wrong. It might be closer to 40, and I didn't even hear about it until one of my coworkers, I heard that she was doing it. And I sort of was like, wow, that's amazing that she's doing that. She's accompanying this woman, and she's a widow, and she's going to be with her through the pregnancy, and then she's going to come in for the delivery and be there for her. And I thought that was really a wonderful way to give and serve in our own way, since I'm not a soldier. And then they posted on the WhatsApp group, and they said, there's a need for another midwife at Tel HaShomer. This one woman wants to deliver at Tel HaShomer, and we need a midwife from Tel HaShomer. Even though this woman actually lives a little bit far from me, and so they were trying to get 2 midwives that lived closer to her, and then myself to be at Tel HaShomer to be the delivering one. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. And they said, okay, it's a complicated situation, and it's a little bit far, but that'll be great. And so I volunteered to do that.
And so just explain. So you the midwife, like you or the midwives in this program, you go to them to every prenatal visit. You do it at home. Like exactly what does it entail? This program.
Right. So basically, they set you up with these women. I guess they're probably all around late 20 weeks, 27 weeks-ish or so, 25, 27, 28 weeks. And then you're supposed to set up a WhatsApp group with them. And then you go meet with the women every 2 weeks to 1 week, depending on the need. We did it every week. And you don't have to go to the prenatal visits, but you do physically go and meet with this woman. So you have those meetings, and then you're available by WhatsApp all the time. Right. So, if our patient, wasn't feeling well, or was, right, I don't know, itchiness or swollen or throwing up or whatever it was, she could text us, A, to ask us medically what she should do, and B, just to have somebody there and say, oh, you know what, that's okay, that's horrible, but maybe try this med, or maybe you need to have your blood pressure checked. They also actually gave all of us a kit so that we can measure blood pressure, and I think even like urine tests and all that, the stick. Anyway, so they did enable us to have that kind of minor care, that if we thought that they needed to be, sent to the doctor or the hospital, that we could do that.
And then you would come in for their delivery.
Then the delivery, so then they call, and then you're there for the delivery, and you're there the whole time. Technically, I guess sometimes it works out that there's 2 midwives from the same hospital with the woman, but it happened to be that I was the only one at Tel HaShomer, so I was the delivering midwife, so I was there all 3 of us were there the whole time. And you basically come in and meet her in triage and stay till she gets to the unit.
Wow. So I mean, you're basically on from when you get connected, you're on call 24/7 for her, essentially.
Basically. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, technically. Like she never bothered us in the middle of the night, but yes, technically, essentially you're there, you're available for her all the time. And it gives her a tremendous feeling of support. And it gives all these women a feeling of continuity, a feeling of support, a feeling of somebody who's knowledgeable and professional and can care for them, and somebody who's not in their circle of family members. So, because that's, a whole nother complicated situation with these women, for whatever it is, there's a lot of emotional issues going on, whatever direction it's coming from. And so we're sort of a neutral professional person, so the women can connect to us. So I think it works really well for that reason.
Wow. And so what was that like for you?
First of all, I loved it. I loved being able to do somebody for somebody who has been so affected by the war, and I love being able to be there for this person. It's a very powerful feeling, and it's a very good feeling, and it sort of also opened up my world a little bit to something that I didn't, because wait a minute, I know nothing. Like, as much as I'm expected by this war and as much as I'm emotionally feeling so much from this war, on the other hand, I know nothing. And so then you could just sort of give your most to that person. And then the delivery, it was very emotional. It wasn't what I expected. It's almost, you think that every delivery is a victory in a way. Like, here we are, we've been attacked, we have our enemies on our borders, and we're still going forward, and we're striving for continuity, which is what we're good at, very good at having babies. And so you sort of think like, this is victory. And that's what I thought before this particular delivery. I thought, wow, it's going to be so amazing and so victorious, and I'm just going to feel so good. And then it came to the delivery, and it was hard. It brought up so many emotions for everybody. And it was painful. I mean, you knew it was going to be painful, but you don't realize the depth of the pain that a woman who's going through birth and life is going to feel death so strongly and so deeply. And there's such a huge part missing. And I left it. I was there basically. It was a very long process of a couple triage visits, and then finally the triage visit that she stayed, and then the delivery. And it was a long process. And I was probably in the hospital for over 24 hours. And I was tired and emotionally drained. And I got in my car and I started sobbing. And I'm going to be very personal here. I started talking out loud to myself. And I said, it's not a victory. I said, this isn't a victory. Because what's victory? Like, victory, you have something good and positive, and yes, the baby is good and positive, and the baby is beautiful and wonderful, and the baby is bringing light into this world. But on the other hand, there's this huge hole, and that hole is never, ever going to be filled. Never. It's an empty hole. And so, you build around it, and you build forward, but that hole is there. And I remember just thinking to myself, I was wrong. Like, I was so wrong with what I thought. And it was very eye-opening for me. It was very painful. It took me a week to stop crying. And on the other hand, of course, there's this beautiful baby, and I got to see the mother, with the baby. It happened to be I worked every day that she was in the hospital still, and so I got to see her every day. So that was really nice. But on the other hand, it was very painful. And what actually happened to be that we had a meeting. The midwife organization has these Zooms for all of the midwives participating, to talk about what we're going through and to give us tools and everything like that of how to deal with what we're dealing with in a very general sense. And it happened to be that week they said, and there's this therapist who, if anybody wants to talk to her, she is offering her services to talk to any midwife who might need it. And I said, oh my God, I need this. And so I texted her, and we set up a Zoom session, and that was actually very helpful. She was wonderful, and I was able to just talk to her, because nobody could understand. Nobody except for the two other midwives who I was with could understand what we went through. And we ourselves, they actually set up a group, and they called it Chani's group, because I was the delivering midwife. So it was most, I think that they felt like I was the most intensely physically involved, even though they were there and supporting us, all of us, the whole time. But they felt that I had the brunt of the emotional stress. And so we were in touch a lot, the three of us, but also this woman. And that was really able to, like, as much as I told my kids and told Moshe, it wasn't the same. For some reason, it was very helpful to tell this professional. And that was probably the start of my stopping crying.
Listen, I mean, we're not meant to process those kind of emotions at the same time. I mean, this is not something that we experience ever. This idea of the most intense, expression of life at the same time as the most intense expression of death. I mean, you can't. It's just impossible to process that easily. It's we're not meant to. Like, I mean, thank God we're not meant to, right? I mean, this is not how humans typically experience. Is the program something that kind of ends after birth, or are you guys in touch afterwards? How does that work?
So we are in touch. We're supposed to technically be there for the 6-week postpartum period. So we did a visit, just a visit. When I say not a medical visit, a fun visit to see the baby. And that was nice, but also still very emotional. Everybody was sort of just recovering, I should say. But on the other hand, you do have this adorable little baby, and we all got to hold the baby. And I actually subsequently, I've been back to visit the mom, but that's sort of on my own, not through the program. But the program is technically through 6 weeks. And again, questions on WhatsApp, and is this normal, and is that normal, and helping, nursing, developmental questions, all of that sort of. And we're all sort of still in touch with her. So that's really nice. I think it would be hard to not be in touch with her. I know, I do text her here and there, but so technically though, it is just up to 6 weeks. And then you can take another patient if you like. I know that many of us midwives have taken on 2. I have a friend who did 3 women since the beginning of all this. I'm working now with a second woman now, so she has not delivered yet. But yeah, it's a lot. And it's also, we actually had a meeting. They brought us all together for a little conference, and it was really nice to see all of us together in one room and to hear some of the other midwife stories. One of the midwives' sons was killed on the 7th of October, a soldier, and she is delivering babies now of women who are also going through this. And it was so powerful to hear her speak and to hear her story, and to see all these other women who everybody has their own story. And everybody has what they can bring to it. So it's a very, very powerful program. Unfortunately, it's not being closed down yet. So
wow, Chani, that's awesome. It's awesome that you're doing it. It's horrible that you need to do it, obviously.
Yeah.
But like you said, what are you going to do? I mean, this is your home. This is your community. These are your people, and you're doing whatever you can. And God bless you. It's amazing. And, that Michal and I adore you, and, you guys, but now all my listeners do as well. And so you've just increased your fan base by, millions and millions of listeners across the globe who now know your story and appreciate what you're doing. We're getting there. Really, it's really amazing. And thank you for it. And thank you for telling us, your story last week and what you guys are doing this week and what it's like. And obviously we're just all wishing you and your family and everyone over there, just, peace and safety, and hopefully an end to all this suffering in the very near future, as soon as possible. Thank you, Chani. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Nady. And I do have to add before we go, I love listening to your podcast as a midwife. As I said, everything's in Hebrew, so sometimes it's nice to listen to your podcast and be like, oh, now I get it. Now that I can hear it explained in English. So I'm not even kidding you. I will sometimes just scroll through your old podcasts and say like, oh, a creda, or oh, premium, like whatever, a little exaggeration. I know what an creda is, but it's the same thing in Hebrew. But it's very helpful, and you're a great, interviewer, and the people you have on are fascinating, and your birth stories are always so emotional and so powerful. And I really look forward to every Monday when you drop the podcast. And, I just, So thank you for doing what you do, and for making clear so much of what is such a complicated time for women, can be complicated, and so many questions, and you've got so many answers. So, and you're fun to listen to. So thank you, Nate. Really glad I got into the podcast.
Yeah, we should have started with that. Who's still listening? For this one, they're still listening. You're captivating. No one shut this off in the middle. I'm certain of it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Nady. I appreciate that.
Thank you for listening to the Healthful Woman Podcast. To learn more about our podcast, please visit our website at www.healthfulwoman.com. That's HEALTHFULWOMAN.com. If you have any questions about this podcast or any other topic you would like us to address, please feel free to email us at hw@healthfulwoman.com. Have a great day. The information discussed in Healthful Woman is intended for educational uses only and does not replace medical care from your physician. Healthful Woman is meant to expand your knowledge of women's health and does not replace ongoing care from your regular physician or gynecologist. We encourage you to speak with your doctor about specific diagnoses and treatment options for an effective treatment plan.